right, and we're back. I'm Dave Weigel of Semaphore, here to moderate this panel with pollsters, who have had a very good election cycle. Pollsters get, I think, too much blame when people in my side of the industry are wrong about stuff. Because no, really, because you all...
Nobody loves pollsters. Nobody wants their kids to grow up to be pollsters.
But you get a lot of input from voters, which we'll be talking about. I'll introduce everybody quickly first. I'm to my immediate right, Adam Carlson, founding partner at Zenith Research. Celinda Lake, right there at Lake Research Partners. There's Evan Roth-Smith at Slingshot Strategies. And Alex Hake, Chief of Policy at Groundwork, and Advocacy at Groundwork. Not a pollster.
Famous.
Yeah, well, I'm privileging the pollster in this discussion. But everyone is dealing at a different level than even the people running for office are. The first thing I was thinking of, because we're surfeited with takes from last night's elections, is just everybody here, based on the work you've been doing the last year, if Ken Martin said, you know, I had a good run, but I'd like to hand the entire party apparatus and messaging over to you, going down the line, what would your messaging for the last stretch of this election be for Democrats?
Thanks for having me, and good to be with everyone. Mine would be to, with both arms, embrace AI regulation as an economic populist issue. It polls, as I'm sure maybe they can attest to as well, polls off the charts. It is, people are very afraid. People are very, both in terms of protecting kids, in terms of their jobs, in terms of just the known unknowns and unknown unknowns, and are looking for some sort of guardrails, but don't understand the issue very well. And it's one of the few issues where neither party has really claimed a mantle on it yet, and really staked a claim or have like a credible messenger. Alex Borez could have been one of those. He's free, he's available. We'll see if he runs for a different office or goes to the private sector. But I think it's a really underrated economic populist issue for 2028, and you start building the groundwork for that now in 26, and refining your message, finding your messengers. And I really think, again, and it polls really well among Republicans and conservatives, and it's not partisan yet. It will be, but it's not yet. So there's an opportunity right now, but I think there's a fear of being having big AI spend heavily against your candidates in the midterms, and I get that, but I would encourage them to kind of be bold and try stuff out this cycle, so that in 28 you can really run with it.
Okay, and so Linda, what would your answer be?
My answer would be that solid messaging is a three-legged stool, and we've got two of the legs down, but the stool is inherently unstable because we haven't got the third one. We've got the everything is shitty down great, but people don't need to talk to the Democratic Party to figure that out. We've got Trump is bad, but what we haven't got is what we're going to do instead. And I would lead with a populist economic message. It would be much more anti-corporate than the current Democratic establishment has an appetite for. And it would link a rigged economy to a rigged democracy.
Going down?
Yeah, I think you're going to hear a lot of the same answers here, but no, I think you would move the party aggressively to the left on economic policy, probably move it to the center on all non-economic policy, and then shut up about that and talk only about economic policy. You just don't want to give people, you don't give the Republicans a reason to poison the well on a candidate who is otherwise going to run on, I mean, economic populism is the most popular policy set in the United States. And you don't want distractions from it because those can be lethal. But I think, you know, for the party and its messaging, you want to restore the choice that the voters who determine competitive elections, who swing or ticket split in competitive districts and competitive states, you know, in most democratic systems, you have a button press. This is my heuristic for how I think about it. Those voters, when the tax rate is too high or economic growth has cooled and the rate of social progress has exceeded their tolerance, they press the red button or whatever color the button is in their country. When economic conditions have gone K-shaped or whatever, or the rate of social progress has not gone as fast as they want, they press the blue button or whatever color button that is in that country. And that is the fundamental choice that most swing voters have in most liberal democracies. And the Democratic Party has basically failed to provide a reliable button press for those voters on our side of the equation. If you want to break up concentrated wealth and power, you can't, those swing voters don't necessarily feel like they can reliably press the blue button, and that will happen. And we have to restore that A to B, and that's, I think the messaging of the party has to be entirely around that. And that means going to war, that means norm breaking and proposal of non-economic, like economic policy that is bad, but fulfills voter wishes. Voters want like deflation. A deflationary economy in most conditions is like awful, right? But voters want stuff like that. They want punitive measures towards CEOs of grocery stores. Like this stuff pulls off the charts. You just gotta go out there and give it to them. I think we have to norm break as a party, be over the target where the voters want us, and restore that clear line of what happens when you vote for the Democratic Party if you're a swing voter, and what you get when they take power, when we take power.
And your answer, Alex? Then I'll dive into what everyone said.
Yeah, yeah. As the non-pollster, I do what we basically do now, which is pay these three folks to give us their ideas and tell us what to say. And I agree with all of this here, but I think one thing that we have consistently seen over the last year and going back even farther, the well-covered Democrats' brand problem is of course partially about who they are and what they have stood for, but it is also in many ways and maybe more important ways about what they have not stood for or what people cannot figure out they want to do, to Celinda's point, providing an alternative and being unified on that. I think that radically simplifying the message for the next 6 months, the kind of home stretch here, would be very useful for Democrats who love to talk about many different issues and have takes on every single kind of policy that you could possibly dream of. I think we saw Mamdani, a lot of not a simplification and relentless focus on an affordability agenda, but also fast and free buses, freeze the rent, and free childcare. People got what he said, they understood what he was for, and it defined him around a few simple ideas and messages that he hit over and over and over again, and really didn't talk about anything else. And I think you could pick three things, I don't know, healthcare, corruption, AI, or some combination of the few, take it with a populist tint and just hammer them over and over and over again. I think that is going to be essential to actually convincing people that Democrats have a unified vision, that they have a coherent worldview, and that when you press that button, you're going to get what you signed up for.
Okay, I heard AI was definitely new relative to what I heard in 2024, and there's a little bit of 2025 in there. But some of these answers did rhyme with what I heard from Democrats in 2024. When we talk about Evan Celinda in particular, when I hear about deflation from Evan, Bob Casey's not a senator anymore. Bob Casey ran on fighting greedflation, and he lost to a hedge funder. Now there are so many X factors going in elections, but haven't Democrats? Didn't they just try this? Didn't they just try some version of taking on corporations and voters didn't believe them?
No, I actually was very disappointed in the 24 cycle. Mm-hmm. We, through our blueprint polling initiative, we were screaming from the rooftops on some of these things, particularly price gouging. Mm-hmm. And what happened was you saw the Harris campaign and much of the party go out there and say it and promise it, and then they reacted to contact with donor class, corporate class, insider class, in an extraordinarily chicken shit way, mm-hmm. And totally backed off of it. And that's like the worst thing you can do, because then you've like signaled we know what the problem is, we know what to do about it, mm-hmm. And then you're like, but actually the people, you the voters, the people who would benefit, we're actually listening to someone else in the end.
Right. I'm remembering she goes to North Carolina. She talks about not greedflation, but parts of the agenda is part of that, and immediately there's criticism. I think Catherine Rampell was one of the people writing about how comparing it to Venezuela. And within, 3-4 hours, I started to see Republican ads saying that Kamala Harris had a Venezuela plan. So Celinda, not to walk into it, is that part of the answer? 2024, just Democrats had the elements here and didn't have the guts to go with it?
Well, we've had the elements here for 40 years, right? And haven't gone with it. So I really think the 24 prism is a very distorting prism. how you get economic credibility. When you said for 3.5 years, inflation is down, you're supposed to get credibility. I mean, I'm not trying to be a Harris apologist or defender, but you're supposed to get credibility on this in 104 days? Come on. And you're running tied to a ticket. And so I think that's a very distorting prism. I would rather focus on where we go from here. And I think the model, one of the models of where we go from here is, I wish, and Adam I see in the audience and others have really been pushing this, and I think they're right, we should issue contract with America. We should, it doesn't have to be everything we stand for God's sake. And it's, 10 one-line items that we commit to. Fire us if we don't get it done. We're going to filibuster the first 3 from day one. We're going to do a Mikey Sherrill and sign it in the middle of our inaugural speech. And let's take some action. Let's take some things that prove that we will deliver on our economic promises. Right now, people think we just sound political. We just have the rhetoric, and then we, issue it in a press release on our way into a high donor fundraiser. I also think, and I think you guys are having some of this later on, there is no economic reform without campaign finance reform. That's the bottom line. Both parties are bought and sold. There's no question about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to stick too much on 2024, but I ask it because...
Good.
Okay, well, no, but I ask it because I was just rereading Joe Biden's farewell address, and he talked in terms that I think everyone here uses, and maybe Trump is unique in reinventing himself from day to day on what he's running on. But that's why I ask about 2024 is because what can Democrats hearken back to as proof that this works? What is the evidence that why should voters trust? Give us power back, and we're going to take on big corporations and make your life cheaper because they're not all Wall Street Journal readers.
Well, that's not our message. Like,
okay.
Listen to that message. We're going to produce, like when? Like when was stuff so great? Like the Depression? I mean, like when? Plus Americans, we're the instant oatmeal culture, right? Nobody in this country would market oatmeal that takes you 3 days to make. If you can't get it in the microwave and out in 6 minutes, my God. So we got to talk about the future. We got to go forward. We got to talk about new leadership. We got to talk about change. And it's hard for some of our leaders who have been fighting for this for a long time. But Bernie Sanders, AOC, don't have any problem being the change-oriented team. So it's about going forward, not looking for historic credibility, unless we're going back to, if we're, maybe in Chicago where we can revive people vote from the grave, but otherwise, I don't think we should be going to historic credibility.
Yeah, Alex was...
Yeah, I mean, I think the simple answer is they can look back to 2024 to see when it worked. It was just for Donald Trump, who had historically high inflation, an unpopular incumbent, and a muddled message from the top of the ticket against him, and relentlessly hammered prices. And of course, some of the culture war kind of issues that were much higher in salience than they are now. But the number one thing he talked about was prices in the economy, and when people pulled the lever for him, the number one thing they pulled the lever for him for was on prices in the economy. And then he went kind of immediately and did nothing about it, and in many cases made it worse. And we're seeing the backlash, right? So that there's clearly a penalty for not delivering. We can talk about disinflation and rates and levels and all the rest, but clearly people are still very upset by high prices. They rate Trump's economy worse than Biden's, which is a little schadenfreude, but still, not anywhere where we want to be. And I think the Democrats, by putting forward an affordability message, have the bones of what it will take to oust an unpopular incumbent and his party, but do not have the credible solutions to then convince people that they are seeing major improvements in their lives. And I think on the policy side, that's where we need to take the next step.
I can ask something fairly easy for a crowd of people who are Democrats and talk to voters, though. When I talk to Republicans and look at their messaging, their version of affordability is look at the tax benefits we gave people and look at how every Democrat voted against them. And starting with you, Adam, just when you talk to voters or get data back, how convincing is that? It's not the tax cut from 2017. It is every ad I see is we cut the Social Security tax. There's no tax on tips. How much is that keeping people with Trump or moving them away from Democrats?
I think that it's much less credible now than it was. I think to Alex's point, I mean, Trump
Was in when they were promising it. You mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think that people have seen what Trump promised. I'm going to bring down prices on day one. That was his big thing. How much were eggs under me? How much were eggs under Biden and then later Harris? And it was a broken promise. And I think they've lost a lot of credibility. And I think that there's this populist, the anger from inflation and the rising cost of living has caused lower income Republicans who have supported them for since the Obama years. You look at a state like Iowa, and they have they voted pretty reliably Democratic or swing state and kind of moved very sharply towards Republicans. A lot of rural, lower income voters, and they haven't really seen the benefits of it. So you see this opening now in the Iowa Senate race and the Iowa governor's race in particular to kind of reclaim that mantle. And I think that it's more a kind of rebuke against Republicans than it is a move towards Democrats. And we're seeing that kind of everywhere. And it's more throw the bums out, punish the people that are in power versus we really think Democrats have it all together. And we really think Democrats have a plan and are moving it forward. And I think that's what Celinda was saying. And I think that's what Alex was saying too, is that you have to boil it down in very simple terms. So the 10 lines here or the 3 things Mamdani said. And I think the big avatar for me for 2028 is the Michigan Senate primary that's coming up. And I think a lot of kind of people in this town, and I'm in New York, but myself included, I've been kind of surprised by the resilience of the El Sayed campaign. Because he has, like Mamdani, 3 big kind of talking points, and everything kind of flows down from there. It's money out of politics, to your point, money in your pocket, and Medicare for all. So 3 things that poll very well. They're vague concepts, they're easy to remember, but he says it with an authenticity that you can't kind of teach. And if I could control the party, I would make every candidate super authentic, even if their ideas weren't super if they weren't super popular. If I'm this all encompassing God that can do that, but you can't, and you can't teach that. And I think that even though I think in a lot of ways McMorrow's policy positions as kind of this Goldilocks middle path are more popular than either Stevens or El Sayed's among the general electorate and even among the primary electorate, like a public option, like overhauling ICE instead of abolishing it, you're seeing her slip because I think there's a lack of perceived authenticity. And not because she doesn't believe those things, but because people are so kind of angry and I'm so upset. I don't know about you all, I've never seen, like Alex, we worked on the white working class focus group stuff together. I've never seen voters so angry and calling for class warfare. Double Trump voters in the white working class are yeah, I want price controls. That sounds good. And you get to harness that and in a positive and affirmative way and not just say, we're not them. Give us a shot.
I think the other thing about Abdul and where his pollster is that he does back it up with his record. He's never taken a corporate contribution. He got eyeglasses for kids. He retired millions and millions and millions of dollars of medical debt when people said it couldn't be done. So there is an element of delivery, but I think the delivery can't be at the partisan level, party level. It has to be at the candidate level. The other thing I think about the affordability agenda, we got our affordability measures, they got their affordability measures. What we have that's unique is wages and unionization, and we should be coupling that with affordability. Otherwise we sound like a Memorial Day sale. We'll give you 10% off on your mattress, they give you 15% off on your mattress. No, we're gonna make sure you have a decent job so you can buy an American-made mattress.
And just following quickly on what sort of promises, if you're writing this contract that Hakeem Jeffries is going to roll out, is it the PRO Act? Is it what pieces of it would be popular for Democrats?
I'm not privy to what he's doing.
Oh, no, we're writing it for him.
We're writing it for him, okay. Yay! We'll break up corporations, break up monopolies, some kind of real populist element. And I think there's stop price gouging, but let's be serious about it. The VA negotiates 399 drugs. The Medicare can't figure out how to do 10. Well, fucking A. Let's all go get the price list from the VA and deliver it to Medicare. That could be a good exercise during lunch. If they can't figure it out, we can. So, I mean, there's just, somebody said last night, maybe it was even a quote from you, Evan, insurgency beat incumbency. Let's be insurgents.
Sounds pretty
Somebody
good.
said,
go with it.
somebody
I
in the
like
Mondami team, maybe Mondami said it, but
Well-
insurgency beat incumbency last night, and that's the lesson.
What is it for Evan too? In talking to voters, what is it they don't like? What comes up that they don't like about Democrats? And again, we've left 2024 in the past, but it's fine. Biden's at the Obama Library somewhere waiting for a ride. We'll move on from him. What is it they bring up about Democrats that they do not like that is still the deal breaker?
Well, we just did. We're going to release it this week.
Okay.
We just did. We started doing these large format open endeds. We call them focus polls, and it's fun. Don't laugh. It's a good idea. Thank you. Where we do these sort of natural language, low question count, open end responses, and we use AI to sort of enable our ability to do this instead of having to code all this stuff and transcribe it. But we just did one where we asked Democrats and independents, what do you think of the Democratic Party? No tilt. And then we asked Republicans and independents, what would it take for you to ever vote for a Democrat? And we just let them talk. And national sample registered voters. Democrats and independents have like nothing good to say. We started doing this in part because if you do just like a multiple choice question poll and do you approve of the Democratic Party, you're gonna get like 80% approval of the Democratic Party from Democrats. But if you let them talk, it's like 16% say something good, and everyone else has horrible things to say about the Democratic Party. And these are partisans. So that was the value in doing it. And like the number one word, people were sounding like each other all over the country of like spinelessness, stick up for something. You're supposed to be the party of working people. What have you done about it? And I honestly think that, I'll leave it to the political historians to determine when this happened, but the Democratic Party made its peace with capital at some point in the last like 20, 30 years. And when you are the center-left party in a political system, you are supposed to be at least adversarial, if not openly hostile towards capital. Representative Kassar said, we have to get used to not being invited to dinners and stuff like that. But it goes further than that. I don't actually really care what the policy set is. You just pick the most popular ones that show that you absolutely hate concentrated wealth and power. I think it's more worthwhile to focus on corporations over individuals, wealthy people. That is something that I think the party needs to get a little better at. There's too much focus on the individuals, and the oligarchy language that was discussed earlier sort of muddies what actually helps people, which is like going after very wealthy companies that are screwing you. But I don't care what the policy set is. Pick the ones that test the best, and just declare war on capital, basically. And that I think will return the confidence that we have seen erode in these studies that we've done of partisan Democrats, not just as well as swing voters, independents, and so on. But the Democratic Party actually stands for something and is willing to do things about it and is willing to get mad about stuff and has some sort of spine. There's this obsession in the party with well, what can we do? We can't win all these fights, right? We can't. It actually doesn't matter if you win those fights. It doesn't matter if you win those fights. The fights have to be better chosen and louder and break more norms and garner more attention and be more over the target. And voters will reward you for that.
We haven't talked too much about Mamdani yet, but as you were talking, I was thinking of Mamdani welcoming a sort of CNBC moderated fight with Bill Ackman many times when he was running for mayor. And I guess that part of that is that Bill Ackman's never going to donate to Mamdani Super PAC. But is that kind of what you're talking about? Just Democrats need to pick specific targets that will get them into. When I say bad news cycles, I'm talking about CNBC again. That's going to get them trashed in some media that's okay with them right now.
The Bill Ackman fight, the Ken Griffin fight, which did not go the mayor's way, I would say, or at least fought to a draw. Those are much less productive than the ticket pricing stuff that he's done with the World Cup. That is why moving the target over to corporations or to inadequately provided or unaffordably provided government services.
Yeah. And I think the thing about Mandami and many other people, and I would go to Abdul and others, they do deliver. It may not be the greatest thing in America. I mean, Mikey Sherrill did deliver. You know, buses are free, the child care is expanded. Mandami took on the whole slate, but spending less time on that and more time on getting money from her for child care. They already had rent control, so it was something that could be expanded. These ideas that sounded radical in Livingston, Montana, where I'm from, actually sounded very normal in New York City. So I think we also have to figure out ways to talk about this, like the grocery store thing. We tested language on the government grocery stores. You know the most popular government grocery store out there? The commissary. If you're in real America and you know any veterans, everybody wants to go to the commissary store. It's really, really good. That is a government grocery store. Mm-hmm. So we need to use more metaphors and analogies. We need to get into real people's lives.
Mm-hmm. And Alex, you were moving your bike like you wanted to talk.
Always want to talk.
Okay, good. Oh no. Okay, well go ahead.
I mean, what we have seen, I think, to go on the question with Evan, is the dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party. Adam alluded to these focus groups we did with working class voters broadly defined, and a lot of double Trumps or Biden Trump, or not voted. And I think one of the most striking lessons that we got out of that is we had a question at the end that was, when is the last time any politician has done something that has meaningfully improved your life? And I don't know, out of the 40 or so people across all the focus groups, I would say maybe 4 people had an answer that wasn't nothing, never. And as a Democrat and have worked in several administrations, I mean, it's incontrovertible that we've done stuff. It might not have been the biggest or the best, or we did the child tax credit. We did things that should show up in people's bank accounts or in people's lives, and there was just absolutely no recognition. The things we got a couple stimulus checks from Donald Trump. One ACA, Obamacare still, and then Obama phones came up. These were literally the only things that people could point to.
Do they not remember the Biden stimulus check?
Not a one.
Poor guy.
Not a one. He didn't. We didn't sign it. And so I think there's the deliverism debate is what we did. What we have done over the last several cycles, has it shown up, or have we been able to communicate it better? I think we just have not delivered on what people want at the time. We ran a jobs-focused and manufacturing-focused kind of message in a time where people were mad about grocery prices, and people had jobs and they were getting jobs but couldn't afford some of these basics. And so I think, again, the simplification, the making things bigger and more obvious. It's not sending 10 press releases or doing events, or even, I think you're talking about CNBC. People aren't watching CNBC, right? Maybe it's good for the clips, but I think the more you can grab the spotlight and the microphone and use that opportunity to really hammer a message and be able to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think this was why the shutdown was relatively successful for improving internal politics for the Democratic Party. And then, of course, when kind of everything fell apart, it fell back down again. But for the first time, it felt like Democrats had the microphone from Donald Trump, who's famous for being able to have the megaphone whenever he wants, and told a story, a compelling story about something people were concerned about. And we saw some real traction gained in that fight, which has since dissipated.
And I think we got to have some specifics that show up at people's real lived experience. And Donald Trump is very good at that. He's also very good at taking credit for our things, like prescription drug prices. And then I think he's very good at pointing out our misses. I mean, when I think about it, my mother wouldn't let me eat maraschino cherries because of food dye. Why the hell didn't we outlaw food dyes, for God's sake? Why did it take RFK to outlaw food dyes? That's absurd. They are masters of the small symbolic gesture, and we are masters of the 250,000-page plan.
And I think on top of that, building on what Celinda and Alex said, if you're driving anywhere in this country and you see one of those signs like paid for by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act of whatever year it was, Biden's name is not on that. And that was an intentional choice because he's like this honorable man. Like, no, it's not about me, it's about the country, etc. Where Trump will just slap his name on whatever.
Well, they've actually
including
updated those
stuff from
signs,
that bill.
literally.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and you see presented to you by John Trump, whatever, something that I think the Democrats, and something back to Mamdani for a second, does a really good job of is taking credit for things without being cocky. And I think that's the sweet spot for Democrats that we are very, very bad at. And that's something you can't really teach. And that's kind of the problem, is you need to find these kind of diamonds in the rough. And sometimes there are backbenchers in the assembly, sometimes there are physicians, sometimes there's somebody else. And you have to just kind of take swings and try. You see someone like Graham Plattner, it's like, seems great on paper, but like a little shaky on the other things, but still has this appeal. But you have to try new stuff. You can't just keep running these kind of state reps who are very polished, that wanted to run for Senate since they were 7 years old and don't come across as super authentic. And I think to that exercise that Alex is talking about, when's the last time a Democrat or any politician has improved your life? I mean, when I was watching that in real time, I was like, we saved the economy twice from utter collapse in 2009 and in 2021. But that's not and that has probably done more to improve people's lives and bank accounts than anyone in the last 30 years. But it's not sexy. It's not easy to explain. Preventing disaster that Republican president or a macroeconomic or global factor has caused is not like, I don't know, throwing your name on a sign. So I think we have to get better at that and be proactive instead of reactive. Some of that's timing. It's bad timing to enter office during the financial crisis and after COVID. But we have an opportunity to show something in 26 and then 28 on what we do when we get the microphone and what we do when we get power. And to Evan's point, like, you don't have to deliver on everything that you are seeking out to achieve. I think voters and people understand that. They're disappointed, and you shouldn't lie. But you should try something, and you should trying and failing is better than saying, well, we can't try that. We're not.
I'm not a deliverist. I'm like a winning electionsist, and I am okay with frankly lying. But one of the most stunning, to your point of like both your points, or all three of your points, of seizing moments and capitalizing on attention. And being willing to just take credit for good things, even if they're like kind of ideologically murky on who you're supposed to be as a politician. During the Biden administration, we did all this testing of policy recall and credibility on policy and things like that. And one of the most stunning results I ever found was that one of the top voter recalls on Biden policy was rejoining the Paris Climate Accords, which is like, if we had to name like 20 things in this room that the Biden administration did that we like would expect voters to remember, would that be anywhere on the list? But it's because he did it. It was the first thing he did, because he had made this promise, the first thing I'm going to do as president is rejoin the Paris Climate Accords. And it was the first thing he did as president. And when voters are paying attention to the president, like inauguration week, right? So they remember, voters had enormous recall on rejoining the Paris Climate Accords. And they didn't have recall or didn't actually believe when we told them about it that fossil fuel production had reached historic highs under Biden, and as a result, energy prices were dropping. They just didn't believe it, and that was in part because Biden was uncomfortable, and the people around Biden were uncomfortable with taking credit for that. Meanwhile, we're happy to hammer Donald Trump when prices are high. We're not willing to take the dub when we bring him down, even if it's like a little ideologically murky for some segments of the party to take that win. Anything good happens in New York City, Zoran Mamdani's like, he's often responsible, but it's true.
Is he not?
like the
Knicks? Is he not actually on the Knicks? I thought he was.
The Knicks is owned by like a MAGA Republican.
Yeah. Oh, you were talking on it. Oh, okay.
I was saying the Knicks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we all went in the same place. I'm curious, having asked what comes up about Democrats, why they're lame, the lack of, they did something for me, that makes sense. I've heard that too. But I think we're going to hear from Dan Osborne here later today. There are some Democrats, it's forgotten now amid other things, but Graham Plattner, one of his differences with Democrats was on gun rights. What else comes up when people are frustrated with Democrats? How much do the cultural issues that Republicans are very, very comfortable talking about? I'm lumping a lot in here. I'm lumping how Democrats talk about immigration, they talk about gender, they talk about guns. How much does that come up as something like, well, I'm disappointed with Trump, but those guys are wimps on issues X, Y, or Z?
I want to take a slightly different position than a couple of things that have been said. First of all, some positions we take because they're just the right thing to do, right? I'm not willing to compromise on transgender issues. I'm not willing to compromise on abortion. They are the right thing to do. But I think we pay a price not for having the wrong position, but for having the wrong priority. We worked in the Factory Towns research with Mike Lux, and 61% of voters after the election thought that Democrats were obsessed with transgender issues. This is effing infuriating. They are obsessed. We are just not going to let people get bullied and hurt. But it's revealing when you don't have an economic plan, when they can't name the 3 things you're going to do like Mandami, then they think you're obsessed with the social issues. So I think our problem is it's much less our position, and frankly, I'm not willing to compromise, and I think we should work with the public, and the public has seen a sea change in their attitudes on abortion, for example. But I do think that we need a solid economic platform, because that's what people, if there's not an economic reason to vote for a Democrat, why in the world would you vote for a Democrat?
I think what we've seen, and we were really trying to dig to the bottom of this, is exactly that prioritization. The vast majority of voters prioritize economic issues over social and cultural issues, and the vast majority of voters believe that Democrats prioritize social issues over economic issues. Of course, there are differences in attitudes amongst demographics and geographic areas on exactly how they feel about those social issues, but when you're talking about just the candidates, they identify Republicans with being obsessed with the things that they are obsessed with, the economy. And they don't identify Democrats the same way. And so I think that, again, a relentless and simple message that is able to break through that is focused on populist economics is going to be necessary to try to change that perception of prioritization. And I do think you're going to see the other thing, the Plattner, the Osborne, Tellerico in Texas. I think the second most popular thing for Democratic candidates to do is to stand up against the Democratic Party. And if that identification, being outside the system, being against both parties, that is something that the voters are really prioritizing. I worked for Bernie Sanders. Bernie has all kinds of views on all kinds of things, and people understand what those views are. They identify him as the most liberal politician in Congress, but they also identify him as someone who stands up to both parties, who is independent and is not swayed by big money or by democratic orthodoxy. And so I think a lot of his ideological positioning gets a pass. He's the most popular politician in the country right now. And so that's, I think, what you're going to see. Tellerico on fossil fuels, Plattner on guns. You're going to see these stances being taken that differentiate you from an unpopular brand of the Democratic Party. And I think it's obviously smart politics to do so. Osborne, of course, on immigration and otherwise. But the core, what you'll find is the core of all of their messages is economic populism. And even Tellerico, when gets asked about some of his previous comments and stances, is they want us looking left and right and not up. I mean, really centering the entire thing around the billionaire class, corporations, money in politics. And I think that coming back to that home base is going to be necessary to change the brand perceptions.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that I've seen pop in the last couple of months, and maybe it's been happening before that, and I'm curious if the other pollsters and policy experts have seen this too, is the issue of corruption. I just got out of the field in Michigan and asked you sometimes, like, well, what's your most important issue? What would affect you and your family? There's different ways of kind of asking issue priorities, right? This one I did something a little different, which is not novel or anything, but just like, what would be the most important issue for, that will affect your vote? I phrased it better than that, but, and corruption was right up there with inflation, which I was like, that can't be right. Inflation's number one with a bullet in all these polls. And I thought something was wrong with my sample, and I double-checked everything and looked, and I talked to some other pollsters about it, and they're like, we haven't seen that much of it hasn't been that dramatic, but it is like 1B right now for a lot of swing voters. Like, they see not just the Trump administration as corrupt, the Democratic Party as corrupt. And there's a real opportunity, like to Alex's point, of like you can get brownie points with voters for calling out the corruption in the Democratic Party and being beholden to those donors. Again, You won't get invited to every dinner. It might hurt you in terms of your big donors, but you'll make up for it with small donors, small dollar donors, which are more replicable, and you can gain points for authenticity. And there's such a broad issue, and there's so many different facets that you can go into, and you can tailor it to your state or who you're running against. You know, if you're running against Ken Paxton, for instance, it's like very easy to make that argument, right? Versus you're running against one like Mike Rogers, it looks a little bit different. But there is this opportunity to kind of have these two twin planks, and they are related. It all comes back to campaign finance, of inflation and corruption as these kind of like two pillars that you could build around, and everything is downstream from that.
We can close on the corruption piece of it because, again, I watch every campaign ad I can for what I'm covering, and Republicans do have a response. If Democrats poke their head up on corruption or on the oligarchy, their response is find some rich Democrat and beat them up and say they're both the same. I've seen this everywhere. So
Soros, right?
well, Soros, but even I've seen people say they're attacking the billionaires, but look at this billionaire who lives in San Francisco and they gave them a bunch of money. San Francisco, I think, is coded whenever they attack it, but I've seen that. So how should Democrats?
They're also developing now,
Yeah.
which I think is even more dangerous, honestly, the so-called fraud narrative.
Yes.
I mean, the quote-unquote Somali fraud, the quote-unquote Native American fraud, et cetera, and I think that's actually more dangerous.
Well, speaking of something that would happen under the Biden administration, they want to talk about, like they were not sending camera crews to capture people arrested for fraud. This one is. Implication being we're taking on fraud and they're not. How should Democrats? So just closing on that, how should Democrats respond to that then? Because there is some fraud there, and there are some billionaire donors. How should they make their campaigns robust against both of these Republican stories?
I mean, I think that we cannot be afraid to call out other Democrats, and particularly if you're in the business of winning elections, right, and not making friends, then I think the answer is to call out both parties. The system is what people are they are fed up with it. They are sick of it. They want major structural changes to how the economy works and how our political system works. They hate both parties, and I think are not willing to accept kind of on their face any messaging from kind of what they perceive as partisan places. And so running against the party where necessary, running against leadership is a time-honored tradition, of course, and we're seeing more and more people running against leadership right now. And then I think at some point the party as a whole needs to actually get its act together and get big money out of politics. The super PACs and the outside spending and the dark money is an escalation that I think many thought is necessary to keep up with the money on the other side. But I think the only way to actually get out of this kind of entanglement is to make real changes. I mean, we haven't banned stock trading for members of Congress, and would you see any time? I don't know. With my friends who aren't politically engaged, they talk about. Trump has made $4 billion since he's been president. He's getting Qatari jets.
And they say Pelosi.
Is long on NVIDIA and insider trading. And there's really no distinction in their minds. And so I think while there's a lot of internally, I think the party is saying, well, of course it's different. People don't see it like that at all, and need to understand that we need some actual substantive changes and some real cleanup. And you do a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Bring people in on both sides. There are Democrats on the Epstein files. There are Democrats who have broken corporate laws, right? There are billionaire donors who are caught up in lawsuits or wage theft or immigration or tax evasion. I think really need to go after them hard, prosecute them, make it public, and use the oversight function not just on Trump, not just on emoluments or the Qatari jet, but really taking on the class and corporations that are making people's lives harder.
Well, and we should be for real change.
This is the last word, but please,
Okay,
I want you to give it, yeah.
It's not accidental that Mondami won with public financing. We need campaign finance reform.
Thank you. Oh, good. Thank you for ending with applause, because I wasn't going to get any. But I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for this great panel, and eager to hear what everyone else has to say.